You're listening to This Motorcycle Life, conversations about why we ride. Episode 4, I Am a Camera. I'm Bruce Philp. Thanks for listening. Well, it was this month in 1998 that the Art of the Motorcycle opened at the Guggenheim Museum in New York City. I always regretted not going, but I recently found myself thumbing through the book that documented the exhibition. And I stumbled on this quote, which begins the chapter on motorcycles and film. It's from a Russian director named Vertov. I don't know how to pronounce his first name. And he wrote it in 1922. It goes like this. Hurrah for the poetry of machines, propelled and driving, the poetry of levers, wheels, and wings of steel, the iron cry of movements, the blinding grimaces of red-hot streams. Well, it's pretty over the top, but it's understandable, given that the machine age was still young at the time. Still, if I told you that Hunter S. Thompson had written it a half-century later, you'd probably believe me. And if I told you that it was from the narration of a new independent film about building cafe racers, well, you'd probably believe that too. The fact is, most of us can still get pretty carried away with the cinematic moments of riding, and it seems like even more of us are trying to capture that feeling on film. Coming up, we're going to meet someone with an interesting take on why that remains so irresistible. But first, some important business. I want to acknowledge the promotional support of my friends at Eat, Sleep, Ride. The stories in these podcasts are about riders like you and me, and Eat, Sleep, Ride is a great place to meet them. You can discover this online community and magazine at eatsleepride.com. And as an avid user, I can also recommend that you download their super useful free mobile app at your preferred app store. I don't ride without it. Thanks, guys. Okay, let's go. So I have a confession to make. It won't be the only one this episode, but here it is. I listen to music while I ride. Experts will tell you that this is not a safe practice, and they're right. I shouldn't do it. But if a ride is long, and the roads are open, and the traffic is light, it will often have a soundtrack. I love music, and for me, it can help keep my mind from wandering on rides like that. But more often than not, it simply adds drama to the experience I'm having. Listening to music while I ride kinda makes me feel like I'm in a movie. Well, it's not completely crazy. Motorcycles have a long history in movies, going back apparently to 1914, in a film in which Charlie Chaplin uses a motorcycle to steal the heart of a lady from his car-driving rival. For motorcycles in Hollywood, things only got darker and more dangerous from there, and eventually, motorcycles became a sort of cinematic shorthand for loners, rebels, and sociopaths. But in recent years, something has changed. There are more films about motorcycles than ever, including countless homemade documentaries and meditations about life on two wheels. The internet is bursting with them, except that they're full of joy now. Other than all that morbid GoPro accident footage that's easy enough to find, most of the fresh work by filmmakers focusing on motorcycles is about how much fun they are. I thought it would be fun to talk about that, and a bit of Instagram serendipity pointed me to someone who's making a career of it. Caius Tenche is the director of the Toronto Motorcycle Film Festival, which debuts this September. And with this inaugural event, he's adding Toronto to a growing international list of festivals for films like this, and he's as excited to be a rider as he is to help them tell their stories. Here's our conversation. Hey, Caius, how you doing?
Hi, Bruce. I'm great. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Thanks for joining me today. Did you manage to get out for a ride?
Unfortunately, not today, but the rest of the weekend is looking spectacular as well, and I'm definitely planning to go for a ride or two if I can.
Me too, or 3 or 4, or as many as I can get away with, as long as the lawn is cut. Well, thanks again for joining me. This is such a cool subject, and a bit personal for me, which we'll get to later. But to sort of start us off, the best way to kind of open the door might be to get you to talk a bit about the festival, which is coming up this September, I gather. Tell me a bit about what inspired you to do this.
Sure. So, yes, you're right. The festival is at the end of September, the last weekend of September. And what inspired me to do it was, well, I'm doing it for selfish reasons, if I could admit to that, which is I really wanted to go to a motorcycle film festival. So let me give you the background story there.
Yeah.
fairly new to motorcycling. This is my fourth season. And as I was getting deeper and deeper into bikes and motorcycle culture, I was looking at a lot of stuff online, YouTube videos, and I came across different movies and started watching those. And then I found out that there's a motorcycle film festival in the States. And I thought, well, there's got to be one in Toronto too. So I looked it up, and unfortunately there wasn't. And I was really disappointed because the idea of sitting in a theater with a couple of hundred other people watching these movies that I was going crazy for on a big screen with a big sound just sounded fantastic. And I really wanted to go experience that. And like I said, for selfish reasons, because I really want to go experience that, I thought if there isn't one in Toronto, I'm going to put one together. And really, that's how it came about. And it just exploded from there.
Yeah, you've had a great response, I think you told me. How many films did you get submitted?
We've actually got a couple more since we spoke. We're close to 60 movies now from 15 different countries. A lot from the States, some from Canada, and some from as far away places as Australia, New Zealand, Russia, lots from Europe. And it's fantastic to see the variety of movies that are coming in from across the globe. They're really great.
And it's a genre, right? I mean, we're not talking about, remakes of The Wild One. We're talking about films about motorcycles and motorcycle people that are new works.
Exactly. Yeah, these are brand new films that are, have been made in the last 1 or 2 years. And they have an underlying theme of the motorcycle or motorcycle culture. Some of them are travelogues, people's experience as they're riding their bikes, let's say across country or across the continent. Some of them are documentaries about people's experience building, customizing a bike, or about a particular manufacturer or biker. Some of them are full feature narratives, just fictional stories that are made up. But again, they have this underlying theme of motorcycle and motorcycle culture in them.
Do you remember any of the films that kind of got you excited when you were first thinking about this?
Absolutely. So some of the things that I saw on YouTube that really got me excited about motorcycle movies, two things. One of them is this YouTube channel called MotoGeo. And MotoGeo is run by this guy's name is Jamie Robinson. He's an ex-MotoGP racer. And now he produces these videos of himself traveling the world, riding different bikes and different sceneries, windy roads, experiencing the local culture and the restaurants. And he just had this exuberance and passion about what he was doing. And I loved that. And then after that, I discovered this series of short movies called Stories of Bike, which are produced by this filmmaker in Australia. His name is Cam Elkins. And these movies really just put me over the top. I absolutely fell in love with them because they had motorcycles as this theme running throughout them, but the movies were really about the people and how they connected with the motorcycle and what it meant to them. So it was more than just looking at beautiful bikes. And yes, there's beautiful bikes there, there's beautiful scenery, but it was about the human element, the human story behind it. And that sort of really opened up my eyes and made me want to see more movies like that.
I wonder how widely it's understood just how addictive this stuff is for motorcyclists. I smiled when you mentioned MotoGeo because he made a film called Night Rider a couple of years ago, maybe more than a couple, about getting onto a Triumph Scrambler and riding to a restaurant to meet with a friend, and that's all it was about. And I
remember that, yeah.
So I had ordered a Triumph Scrambler at around that time. I must have watched that film 100 times. I'm embarrassed to admit it, and hopefully none of my friends are listening. But I must have watched that film 100 times, and I was like, I want to be that guy because clearly he could ride.
Yeah.
But it was the life he was leading that I found so intoxicating.
Yeah. I was lucky that I met him a couple of weeks ago. In a way, I maybe idolized is the wrong word, but I sort of really, like you said, looked at him with these, starry-eyed, wow, what a life, and so on. He must be leaving. And I met him a couple of weeks ago, and I had the opportunity to sit down with him over a beer and just chit-chat. And, this is what he's doing is really a passion project coming out of his heart because he loves motorcycles so much and he loves sharing it with people. In the movies or in his little shows, you see him riding around Italy on these Ducatis and so on, and you think, this guy must be he's living the life.
Yeah.
He's not. He's just a regular guy like you and I. He's not loaded. He's not making a ton of money. He's just doing it because he loves it, and he loves to share it with people, and he loves to get other people excited about it. And I think maybe that's why his videos are so successful, because they're genuine and from his heart.
Is that a pattern in the work that you have had submitted for the festival, or is it a pattern in the work that you've seen that you admire, this authentic passion, if I can summarize it that way?
Definitely, I think so. Most of the movies that have been submitted by people who are motorcyclists themselves. And I think their passion for motorcycles is translating into their craft, into the films that they've produced. And you can definitely see it in some of the pieces that they've put together. It's coming through loud and clear.
Is this kind of a new thing? I mean, I experience this genre of film as new, but maybe it's just because I, like you, am fairly new to riding. Is this something that has erupted in the last few years?
I don't know if I can say, because I think I'm still too new to all of this, and I'm learning as I'm accumulating submissions and as I'm interacting with different people from the motorcycle community. I think people have been wanting to videotape their motorcycle adventures or make movies about motorcycles for a very long time. I mean, we can go back to movies like The Wild One or Easy Rider, but I think the advent of small, portable, digital cameras has definitely made it more accessible and easier for people to do. I was in conversations with one of the members of our judging panel who's a pro photographer, and he's been doing photography for about 40 years, photography within the motorcycle industry. And he mentioned how he used to strap 5-pound cameras to his helmet so that he can capture some of the footage. I mean, that could not have been comfortable and perhaps dangerous as well, but it's certainly a lot easier to do that nowadays. And so I think it's opened up the door a lot. I think that's a part of it. The other part of it is just the desire of people wanting to share their experience.
Yeah, it's funny. You said something funny when we had our pre-interview conversation the other day, that you doubted that there were as many films about golf as there are about riding motorcycles. And if we assume, which I thought was great, and I wrote that down, I was going to steal it, but now I've said it in the interview. It's fair to say that the democratization of tools made them available to everybody who's passionate about what they do. But this particular tribe seems to have really taken to it.
Yes. For sure. The tools that are available now to make movies make it very easy to take them, mount them to their helmet and to their motorcycle and start riding around. And people have done that. They put up their videos on YouTube, for example. There's a lot of motorcycling vlogs out there that people can watch. What the other genre that's coming out are these movies, these narratives, whether they're documentaries or narratives, that really capture something more than just the vlog of somebody riding around the city. Technology has allowed people to produce these movies, but if you were just looking at the movie, and for sure it could have the latest whiz-bang 4K features, and the movie can have drones in it that show a beautiful aerial shot and so on. But I think that gets tiring really quickly. Underneath all of that, there's got to be some sort of a story. And whether the quality of the video is there or not almost doesn't matter. If once you have a really good story, it can suck you right into it. And that's what we're looking for in the film festival and in the movies that we're going to select from those 60 to show at the festival. And those filmmakers that have produced those sort of movies, I think they're the ones that are elevating this form, this art form, if you will, of creating these motorcycle movies.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, obviously that's necessary to advance the form, but I also think it's true that I haven't yet met a motorcyclist who didn't have a story to tell, so maybe there's something there. Do you get the sense that this is matured enough to the point where we're starting to see subgenres? I mean, or is it still too new for that?
I think I'm starting to see some of the subgenres in the movies that have been submitted. Again, so we talked about them feature films, whether they're narratives or documentaries. Some of the movies are about a particular culture. For example, the motorcycle clubs. Some of the movies are about trail riders, so adventure riders. So there's definitely subgenres there. And the interesting thing, though, and I was thinking about this, is that unlike other forms where things start to separate, like music, for example, I remember growing up, there were either you were into rock or you were into disco, and the two people didn't talk to each other. They hated each other.
Right.
I don't find that in the motorcycling community at all. I think it's the opposite. It's very inclusive. And so you might have people that are into cruisers or motorcycling clubs still being interested in movies that have like an adventure twist to them, or vice versa. I think people that are passionate about their sport, like motorcyclists, are passionate about the whole gamut of it. At least that's been my experience and the people that I've met. That yes, they may be the cruiser guys, but they like everything to do with motorcycling, cruisers or not.
Yeah, I have found the same thing. There's a real kind of ecumenical spirit to this, and I guess what I hear you saying is that that's being reflected in the sort of, growth of homemade films about the life. And I want to ask you a little question about origin there. So when I think about the films that I've seen that I particularly enjoyed, and they all fall into a certain period of time, but I'm thinking about films like The Greasy Hands Preachers or 21 Days Under the Sky or It's Better in the Wind. They all had some connection to the sort of urban biker scene, the kind of like cafe, scrambler, modern classic scene, which is a pretty well-developed subculture, right? It's got its own fashion and all that stuff. And so a lot of films seemed inspired by those guys. Even though, for example, 21 Days Under the Sky was a road movie, they were going to the Brooklyn Invitational. I mean, it's right. It really was of that world. Is there a connection there? Do you feel like that's where it started, or is that just how I found it?
I can't say whether that's how it started for everyone, but my experience has been similar to yours. It's definitely been fueled by this urban riding scene. If you go into downtown Toronto, you see so many motorcycles everywhere, and it's gone up year over year. Some of the streets in downtown Toronto where motorcycles park, they almost look like mini motorcycle hookups. There's just so many of them. And I think, as I know myself, when I started to see motorcycles more and more and become more and more aware of them, my eye, gravitated towards it, and I enjoyed the beauty of the motorcycle itself, and then the mystique around the people that I would see come, after work, put on their helmets, start the bike, straddle it, and take off. And I wanted to experience that and be a part of that. That certainly helped to fuel my interest and passion for motorcycles.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how it went for me. And there's something powerful about, a symbol of freedom, which I think people can agree is part of what a motorcycle is. in the context of the confined, ordered urban environment, there's something especially defiant about that's appealing. I can totally see how you got there. I just wondered, when you think about brands like, I'm saying brands, but we're going to get to that a little bit later. But when you think about, content makers like Iron and Resin and Deus Ex Machina, where, they're clearly selling something, but they're doing it so effectively because they've attached themselves tightly to this scene. It just felt kind of like a beginning to me. My sense was that everything else kind of followed that moment in motorcycling history when the past all came back and the cities reasserted themselves in the lifestyle.
Yeah. I think those brands that started to produce some of those movies, and those were some of the first movies that I saw myself, and, made me aware that, hey, there's these other movies out here. It's not just a review of this particular new motorcycle that was released. It's not about, its specs and what it's like riding it. It was like trying to tell a story about that lifestyle surrounding that brand or that motorcycle. And I think that those manufacturers that had started to put that together, I think they helped to fuel this filmmaking genre forward in a couple of ways. One of them is obviously they provided funding to the filmmakers to allow them to make these movies.
Right.
And I think it also opened up maybe the eyes of some filmmakers to think, wow, look at this piece that was built and I could do something like that too. Or maybe they had an idea already, but just didn't think that that was something that maybe people were interested in. I think it was aspirational, and it probably did provide some motivation to existing or up-and-coming filmmakers to produce their own content.
Yeah, it certainly showed the potential for kind of romance and storytelling, right, as you say, and which had to have been an inspiration. I mean, honestly, I almost felt like the commercial world led the way, but I can't say with certainty that that's the case. It's just how kind of I got there. The other day when we spoke, you mentioned something interesting about the sort of maker culture, the connection, if there is one, between the kinds of people who build and wrench their own bikes and the kinds of people who make their own films. Can you talk a little more about that? What's the connection there?
Well, I definitely think that there's something happening in the world, in our society, and especially around the maker culture. And I can't say exactly why it is, so I'm just guessing, or maybe thinking about how it's impacted me or where it's hitting me, and extrapolating that to assume that other people are feeling the same way. But I think in this world that's becoming, or that is more and more digital, and although we're connecting more than ever before, it's all digital. I think we're craving this sort of personal human-to-human connection. And I think that's one of the reasons why these sort of films that allow people to share their experience are becoming so popular. And so that leads to the production of these sort of movies. The other component that we had talked about in the maker culture that I'm seeing is in places like in restaurants, where restaurants are becoming very, very crafty and very focused on producing quality, like a much smaller subset of items. They're not going to give you a menu with 100 items. They might not only have 10, but they're going to be the best that they can possibly make with things that are in season, that are of high quality, and so on. And so the restaurateurs are they're very passionate about that. And I think people are gravitating to that and wanting to experience that and connect with that. You also see that in the bar scene with craft cocktails, and perhaps even in the business world with, at least myself, I'm finding more and more people are trying to become entrepreneurs and start their own business that's sort of fueled around what their passion currently is. And I think motorcycles do this in a way as well, because motorcycles are so raw. It's just you and the machine and nature. And I think they help to satiate that sort of desire that we have, maybe to go back to a simpler time or to connect with something that's tangible and real. Whether that's you riding the bike and feeling the wind going by you, or definitely when you connect with other bikers who are as super passionate as you are. And I have yet, an interesting thing, I don't think I've yet met a motorcyclist who isn't passionate about it. I just thought about that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think probably elsewhere in the world there are some, people who ride bikes because it's a valid form of transportation, or
Sure.
But certainly in the kind of the sort of parts of the world like the one we live in, I agree. I mean, not only passionate, but romantic. This whole podcast concept is sort of predicated on the idea that there's a philosopher under every motorcycle helmet, and I have yet to find the exception.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'm looking, as I stand here, I'm looking at a gorgeous coffee table book that my son gave me recently from Deus Ex Machina, and it's a book of photography. It's funny how naturally the subject lends itself to artistic treatment. I think about the Art of the Motorcycle exhibit at the Guggenheim all those years ago, which remains to this day the most attended show they have ever put on. And it makes me think about this connection to art, and I wonder, based on the films you have seen and based on the people that you've met, are we reaching that far yet? Has this got to the point of art, or are we at least headed that way?
If we're not already there, we're definitely headed that way. I think the question that you raise is a really good one, and I think would be great to bring up during one of the Q&A sessions that we're going to have at the festival. What I can tell you is that some of the filmmakers are definitely artists. Absolutely. They have an amazing eye, they're creative, and they're great storytellers. I think anyone can, with practice, learn how to take great videos, using things like the rule of thirds and figuring out like how to focus and so on. That can be learned. But I think there's a real artistic craft there that goes way beyond that I've seen in the movies. So there's definitely art there. Do the filmmakers themselves consider what they produce works of art? I'm not sure. I think that some of them, yes, and they would be right. There was really some beautiful works out there.
That's exciting to hear. Now, you just got back from the Lisbon Motorcycle Film Festival, which I didn't even know existed. Are there such festivals in a lot of cities?
There's still only a small handful. There's a couple in the States, so New York and Portland. Lisbon this is their second year, and it was fantastic. There was also a film festival in Madrid this year. That was their first year. And there's going to be one in the French Riviera in Nice next year as well. And of course, let's not forget Toronto. This will be our first year. So there's definitely more, but it's still a very small community. But the other thing that I've seen is these little pop-up film festivals, if you will, where they've taken content perhaps from one of the other festivals that I just mentioned, and they're going to do like a one evening showing of the best of what's there. Or even festivals where they're showing some very old content, like some of the original motorcycle movies that we had mentioned before, like The Wild One and Easy Rider and so on.
What kinds of people attend these things?
So in Lisbon, the people were exactly like the sort of people that we're going to see here in Toronto. All walks of life, short, tall, skinny, fat, everyone, ladies, gentlemen. I found it in Lisbon, again, to be very inclusive. There was a broad range of different motorcycle motorcycle types and motorcyclists there. But it was a very welcoming and very open event with a very positive vibe. So I was curious about what it was going to be like in Lisbon versus what I think it's going to be like in Toronto. And I found it to be, although thousands of kilometers away, very, very similar.
Yeah, I guess that shouldn't be surprising, but it's so exciting that you are so early in the curve. When you mentioned Lisbon, I thought, well, then, geez, that's slightly exotic. There must be 100 of these things, but apparently not.
No, there's not. But I think the fact that there's some more popping up also means that there's people out there in the world who are craving this as much as I was. And so they're taking it and putting it together because they're passionate about the culture and the community, and they want to share it.
Now, I think you told me that you had seen 21 Days Under the Sky screened in Lisbon. And if I've got that right, you met some of the people involved in that production. That film in the, sort of in the internet forums came in for some, kind of faint praise. I think, people didn't feel comfortable admitting that they were caught up in the story. But I enjoyed it. I mean, it was excessively romantic, but on a February night, with the snow raging outside, it was just transporting for me, and I loved it. How was the film received there, and what kind of perspective did you get from the guys who made it?
It's a great question because I was wondering the same thing. I too found the film overly romanticized. It wasn't for me. But there were still aspects of the movie that I really enjoyed tremendously. So I was wondering how that's going to play out in Lisbon, especially because it's so thick in Americana. Could the audience in Lisbon connect with it? And so I was watching the movie there. It wasn't the first time I saw it. And I was looking around to see what the reaction was of the audience. And they were all just watching it quietly. And when it was over, there was a standing ovation and people were clapping.
Wow.
So they connected with it. They loved the movie. Beyond the Americana there's still some underlying core things that, the freedom, exploration, adventure that translates cultures, translates countries, and has no boundary.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, atmospherically, the film was full of that stuff, and that was, that kind of made it worth my time all by itself. But I also kind of thought, a lot of the bikes that get shown at the Brooklyn Invitational arrive on trailers, and I thought there was something kind of cool about deciding to ride there, in these homebrewed bikes, without a whole lot of support, that I thought was kind of legit. Maybe I was just in a forgiving mood, but I thought the story held up.
Yeah, and they had a Q&A with the filmmakers. There was one of the riders there, Troy Critchlove. He was in attendance, and the screenwriter was there as well. So the audience got a chance to ask them some questions and maybe dig a little bit deeper into the production of the movie and how it came about. And it was absolutely 100% legit. Nothing was set up on purpose. And especially the riders, they even mentioned that, they found it at times, especially at the beginning, a little bit intrusive that their cameras were there filming because they just wanted to go on this ride. So it was absolutely legit. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why it is successful, is because it's authentic.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't mean to pick on a single film, but that one has a lot of the elements that I think we've been talking about, and I thought it was cool that you got to watch it screened in front of a larger audience. So we touched earlier on the subject of marketing, and that's a word that tends to make people's eyes roll. But as I said earlier, I feel like the marketers in the motorcycle world caught onto this early and may in some ways have been a cause of it. I'm thinking here about things like, Yamaha's Yard Built series a few years ago, which was totally all about the custom scene, or the work that Iron and Resin has done, their Hooligan Hoedown films. And there was one called... what the heck was it called? It was called Afternoon Delight, and it was about a guy and his girlfriend on a Triumph Scrambler again, going out for a picnic. And it's like, I know they're trying to sell me pants, but I watched it and I liked it. How do you feel about this? Has this been good for motorcycling and films about motorcycling? And how do you feel its influence now?
So I've watched those movies as well. Yamaha, like you said, and BMW's produced some. It's marketing. They're trying to sell you stuff, if you will. But I think we put it aside for some reason because we're enjoying visually what we're seeing, and we're enjoying the story that they're telling us. And I think they've connected with something which is beyond the motorcycle itself. It's about the experience of what it's like to be a biker, what it's like to be if you wore those pair of jeans or that jacket, how you would feel and how you would interact with different people in that community. I think, again, it could be inspirational in some ways and maybe even open up your eyes to things that you just never thought of before. And so this will make you want to try that. I can relate to that because, like I said, I am fairly new to motorcycling, again, year 4. And how I got into it was just I came across an article in a magazine that talked about cafe racers, and I just loved how they looked. I loved sort of the concept of the culture behind it, and it's what drew me in, and that's where it started, and it moved from there. But I think the same thing can be said with not only people that are not in the scene right now, but also maybe people who are, let's say, adventure riders as an example, but now they're seeing this great lifestyle video produced by Iron and Resin, and maybe it's going to open up their minds towards something else.
Yeah, I think that's how it works. I mean, there's no doubt, and again, one has to be careful getting one's insights from forums because people have a particular way of behaving in those environments. But it just feels to me like fantasy is a big part of this for almost everybody. There's clearly a big fantasy component for the sort of cruiser, the kind of pirates, as some people call them. There's clearly a fantasy component for a lot of people who ride ADV bikes, and I think. Obviously, the modern classics, are all about, a past that may or may not have happened. And I mean, I'm good. I do it. I mean, when I'm riding, I am so good looking and fit, and I'm 22, right? I mean, it just so it feels like that's, as a consumer product, that makes motorcycles and motorcycle gear super unique. To have that kind of invitation. I feel like that's where.
But how much? I wonder, though, how much of that fantasy, as you're saying, isn't really reality? Because as an outsider, as a person who never rode a motorcycle before, when I saw those ads, those movies made by Yamaha or Iron and Resin, and it looked like a fantasy, it was a fantasy at that point in time, thinking, wow, can you imagine what it must be like to be with, go hang out with that group of people, to go on that kind of a ride, to have that experience of riding cross country or what have you. And then when you get into it and you meet these folks, they're just regular, very nice folks like you and I, very welcoming. And then, all of a sudden you're on that bike and you've got those clothes on and you're going on this ride. So how different was it from what that fantasy world that they portrayed in that film? I don't find it to be that different.
That's a fair point.
Honestly.
That's a very fair point. It's true. We
I
are
think
out there.
You know, the cinematography maybe was great, but when I'm out riding, whether by myself or with a bunch of people, I feel like I'm living that dream video that I saw on YouTube.
That's really interesting. And so the experience that we have, you know, creates this kind of recursive loop with how it's presented in film. Boy, that can't be bad for film.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So I guess it brings me back to a question which I feel like I've already, you know, kind of poked at a few times, but bear with me. You know, I would be embarrassed to tell you how many hours I have spent watching short films about motorcycling, you know, on YouTube and on Vimeo. And I'm sure that I am far from alone. I mean, it's not unusual to see, you know, view counts in six figures for these things, which, considering how niche they are, is remarkable. You know, they get you through the winter. They're part of the ritual of buying a new bike. You know, as riders, we seem to love this stuff and to have an endless appetite for it. And I guess I still am curious about why. Why is that appetite so bottomless? Which I believe it is, and hope for your sake that it is. What do you have any sort of trenchant things to say about why that's happening?
I've thought about this in the past myself, and I wish I had a great answer. I don't know why. First of all, I want to admit that I, too, have spent countless hours watching these videos online, so you're not alone. And I think there's probably lots of other people in our motorcycle community that will attest to the same. I think there's a couple of reasons that we love this stuff so much, and it doesn't seem to have an end. One of them we had touched on before, which was that it's motivational in some ways. It's aspirational, and it's opening your eyes and your brain to new experiences and giving you ideas about things that you could be doing. The other one is that it's, and this isn't specific to motorcycle movies, maybe just movies in general, but it's voyeuristic in a way, that it's allowing you to watch what's happening with these group of people in a way that you don't feel guilty about it, because it's not like you're standing on the street beside them staring at them and they know you're looking. So you've got this like permission to watch what's happening there secretively. No, they don't know, no one else knows, but you get to experience it. So there's a little bit of voyeurism there. And, you know, tied to that is maybe you're living a little bit vicariously through them and through their experiences. So I think there's some of that. I think we are, as humans, in search of experiences all the time. And these movies are allowing us to get that, or to satiate that need.
That all makes a ton of sense. And the thing that you said that kind of made a big light bulb go off over my head was motivational. That I've not heard anyone make that observation before, but that feels very true for me. You know, I still find this challenging to do well. It's, you know, it's time consuming and it's dangerous and all those other things that we know so well, even though we love it. But you're right. It is motivating to watch, you know, 15 minutes of beautifully executed footage of someone who's kind of, if you squint your eyes, almost like you and me, doing his thing. It does kind of make you want to go out and thumb the starter. That's really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. But again, I'm going to go back to something that I said before, is that, and I've been lucky now as part of this working to put together the Motorcycle Film Festival, I've got to meet more and more of the people that are in the Toronto motorcycle community. And, you know, again, what I'm finding is that everyone is really all the same underneath all of that leather, or all underneath the helmets. Everyone is simple, easygoing, welcoming, very open, and very passionate. And it's very different from maybe the image that the rest of the world thinks of motorcyclists, which is a shame, because it really is a terrific community, a group of people. And that's one of the things that I am enjoying so much, is the ability to connect with other like-minded individuals. It's that human part, that human connection.
Yeah, that's so true. It is the single thing that surprised me the most about becoming a rider was how awesome the people are. It really is quite exceptional. When we think about the kinds of films that you're going to share with us this fall, it seems like a lot of this work is sort of the moment. And I don't imagine that in 20 years someone is going to be still making films like 21 Days. Where do you think this is headed? Do you sense evolution in the work that you've seen so far?
Well, I think that in the future, I think movies like 21 Days will still be made. I really do. So look back at a movie like Easy Rider. It came out in 1969.
Right.
So 47 years ago. And here we are still making movies sort of like that. Okay, 21 Days is not like Easy Rider, but it's got a lot of similarities, some, underlying themes that are similar: freedom, exploration, and so on. And so why wouldn't humanity still be making movies like that 47 years forward?
So
I think we will be. There's still, no matter what, and motorcycles may or may not look different 47 years from now. But underneath all of that, there's still this thing that's connecting us all, which is this desire for freedom and for adventure and for experiences. And sharing that through films, I think, will definitely still happen.
Yeah, and that's so the style may change, but the need to tell this story isn't going to. Yeah, so that's kind of encouraging to me, and I buy it. It's funny, we were talking the other day, a friend of mine and I, about what was going to happen when the world was full of self-driving cars and Ubers and stuff, and he said that when it's all said and done, motorcycles will become like horses. When we don't need them anymore, we'll finally be able to appreciate how beautiful they are, and I think that might be fuel for the future that you've just painted for us.
I agree.
So, do you think that you'll ever cross that line and strap a GoPro to your bike and make a movie yourself?
I don't know. It's certainly not in my view right now, but I guess never say never. I think there's definitely a creative side to me, and I enjoy making, mini movies about my personal travels and family holidays. And I try to make them as like a great story, have the beginning, the middle, and an end, not just the typical, I guess, idea of a home movie. But to make a motorcycle movie is a pretty significant undertaking, and my focus is just not there right now. Right now, I'm focused on the film festival, making sure that we're going to be producing something that's of high value that the audience will appreciate, and related to that is connecting the filmmakers to some means that they can better distribute their movies, so that it will fuel into funding for making more content in the future. That's really where my focus is right now, but never say never, and it probably would be fun to produce something like that.
Never say never. I mean, that would be both of our stories as writers, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you would have asked me 5 years ago if I'd be putting on a Toronto Motorcycle Film Festival, it was the furthest thing from my mind. But who knows?
Now, in my show notes, I'm going to put a link into your website and a bit of information about the festival. But is there anything you want to share while we're talking about when and how it's all going to work?
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah, so the festival will be on the last weekend of September. So September 20 9th through the 30th. Is when we're going to be showing the movies. On the Thursday before, we're going to be having an opening night party somewhere, which I think will be just an excuse to get the motorcycle community together and get us all excited about the festival itself. And then on the 29th and the 30th, we have 4 screenings to date, where from those 60-plus movies that we have received, we're going to pick the best ones out of those and program them into the different time slots. So at each film screening, you're going to see a feature movie and then a number of shorts. So all in all, I'm expecting that there's probably going to be around 20 movies that are going to be shown at the film festival. The festival will take place at the Review Cinema in Roncesvalles, which is a great street if you're not familiar with that. It's very lively. It's got a lot of restaurants and bars, and it's an old street, and it's fantastic. And I'm just imagining right now the street lined with motorcycles, a red carpet, people queued up to come in and watch these movies. And I could picture it in my mind's eye, the lights dimming and then the movies being played on the big screen, and again surrounded by hundreds of other people that are just as hyper passionate about motorcycle and the motorcycle communities as you and I. I think it's really going to be great, and I don't want to wish the summer away, but I can't wait for that. I'm very excited about it.
I am too. I can't wait. I will definitely be there. And it's funny. I think you put your finger right on it when you said it isn't just going to be the films, but it's going to be being in a room with, 100 people who are just like you to watch them.
Yeah.
I'm excited. And I know that.
So, I talked before about 21 Days Under the Sky in Lisbon. So I've seen that movie before. I've seen it on my computer. I've seen it on my TV. It was very different to see it on the big screen. 1, because of the size of it and the sound of it, and 2, because of the people around me. A very different experience, much better and richer experience.
I can't wait. Caius, this has just been...
Me too, Bruce.
It's been great to meet you, and I really appreciate your time, and I feel like I need to thank you for the community for taking on this festival project. I wish you every success with it, and hopefully then or before then we'll get to shake hands in person and maybe have a ride together. Thank you very much, Bruce, for this opportunity. I love to talk about the film festival and about movies. I'm very passionate about it and excited, and really can't wait to share this with everyone. And I'm looking forward to meeting you in person as well. Thank you. Thank you, Bruce. Well, it's true. If you were to snoop in my browser history, you wouldn't find anything of an adult nature. You wouldn't even find much of a grown-up nature. What you would find is a lot of adolescent ephemera about motorcycles and the people who ride them and how much fun they are. It's a guilty pleasure. But Caius said 2 things that made me think feeling guilty might be silly. For one thing, he sees these films as motivations. Well, that really resonated for me. Riding is fun, but it takes a certain amount of discipline. You have to, as Todd Egan told me, ride lots to get good at it. And you have to get good at it in order to survive. So anything that keeps that fire lit is good. Anything that reminds you of how worth it this is good. Caius also insisted that films about motorcycles and the people who ride them shouldn't be thought of as fantasies, because we're part of that same community. We ride too. And maybe we just have an appetite for all this stuff not because we wish we were like the people we're watching, but because we are. Well, thanks for listening. You'll find show notes for this episode at thismotorcyclelife.com. And that's also how you can reach me if you have questions, comments, or suggestions. And you can find me on Instagram at thismotolife, where I like to post pictures of bikes I find on the street. And maybe I'll find yours someday. To take us home, here's a recommendation for your This Motorcycle Life playlist. The band is called Cuff the Duke, and they hail from Oshawa, Ontario, about 2 hours from here. We first heard them a bunch of years ago when they opened for Blue Rodeo, and we were blown away by their stage presence and their musicianship. The song, appropriately, is called It's All a Blur. Check it out, however you like to get your music. And in the meantime, keep staying alive out there.
This time and place wrong this circumstance under? What really happened? I've been away too long, lost track and so unsung. It's all